So just doing some finishing connection. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, under the circumstances.
So I wanted to just have a chat with you because I hope that you have an impartial view on everything. So Jeremy, maybe first let's introduce you. You're a teacher, a rabbi, an author. What other accolades have you
That's enough. I'm not a big fan of accolades.
No?
I'm me.
Okay. You've been a long-time mentor for me in some of the work that I've been exploring, alternative connections to the Torah and some of the texts. So I've always been very grateful to have you as a sounding board when I am myself trying to process or understand something that's sometimes too complex for me to digest. And today, what has driven me to reach out, and maybe your message this morning when I checked in on you, because I just had a feeling I needed to check in on you, and I said, "How are you doing?" And you said that you were a bit, not a bit, but quite disturbed by the level of anti-Semitism that you have seen, and that you have not, I mean, I don't know if you, hopefully you haven't experienced it yourself, but through.
Oh, I have, unfortunately, yes.
But also friends of yours, people that you're connected to, part of your communities in Germany and other places. So it's also connected to the war in Palestine. I see a lot of posts on social media, a lot of which it's quite extreme. So a lot of polarity in what's being shared. One side very pro-Jewish, another side very. I mean, that's the pro-Jewish is the wrong word, but I would say like this. Let's just say what I see. A lot of people that I actually love and respect talk about the genocide that's happening right now in Gaza. So I think that as a that information that's being shared that's actually, I think, one of the kind of driving factors for a lot of the kind of emerging anti-Semitism, because the people connected, they see a lot of pain, they see a lot of suffering, and they feel anger, they feel these visceral responses. They're like, well, Jewish people are causing this pain and suffering, and they're creating what's called a genocide. So they're saying, something I just read moments before I reached out to you was funny that Jews, the perpetrators of a genocide, are mourning a genocide that happened to them. And I was like, wow, that's from someone I like, from a teacher that I really respect and admire. Actually, I'm not going to mention any names. So I was like, wow, that's wild. And when I see that, and I see someone that I really respect sharing that kind of information, saying the people that, it's funny that the people who experienced the genocide are mourning, or that are perpetuating a genocide are mourning a genocide. And it's like, that just seems, thankfully, I'm not in any of this, but I see a lot of information coming through. What are your thoughts on all of this?
I've spent my life in education and in public trying my best to reconcile Palestinian and Israeli positions. And I've met so many times with people on both sides, communicated with them, and there are a lot of people on both sides who understand each other's positions. But unfortunately, in the world in which we're in, people are not interested in facts or evidence, but in slogans. In my time in the interfaith world, which my brother is still very involved with because he is also rabbi in Abu Dhabi, and he and his wife are at the forefront of reconciliation. The fact is that there is a very small number of intelligent, sensitive people on both sides who can talk to each other, who do respect each other. The trouble is, how do you reach down to the masses, and how do you deal with a situation which is a political situation, and we know that all politics is lies. I'll give you one small example of what the problem is. Have you heard of any gas chambers that Israel has built to mass kill millions of people the way the Nazis killed the Jews? No, you haven't. Israel has been in charge through occupation on the West Bank, which I disapprove of, for several generations. And during that time, the Palestinian population has boomed. The population in Gaza has doubled. Now, if Israel is genuinely genocidal, it's probably the most incompetent, worst genocidal power there's ever been. Now, we're faced with a situation in which one side attacks the other side, a situation in which hatred, antagonism has been perpetuated for a long, long time. And it behoves both sides to try to understand the position of the other. But what I'm seeing now around the world is a refusal to look at the facts, a refusal to be objective, and a refusal to hear both sides. And that is what disturbs me. In the same way that I'm just as disturbed as I am of the division between those countries in this world who don't respect any human rights, those that do, those who have dictatorships, and those that have free societies. And I am strongly in favor of a free society in which people from different backgrounds can coexist without killing each other. And now what I've experienced is calls not for a political solution, but to blame one side only and to call for the death of those that support that one side. So if it would just be a matter of demonstrating against what's going on in Gaza, fine. I mean, there are plenty of Israelis who demonstrate against it. There are plenty of Israelis who disagree with the government. You're going to lump them all together and say, kill a lot of them? And conversely, if you want to say, free Palestine, fine, I would agree with that. I want to see free Palestine, but not at the expense of destroying a Jewish homeland. And after all, everybody, I think, has a right to a homeland. I'd love to see a universal world in which there are no governments, no armies. This is what we mean when we talk about, if you like, a messianic or a mystical era in which people are allowed to live and fulfill their potential. And I would willingly abandon a Jewish state if everybody else abandoned their Jewish states. If there were no Christian states, if there were no Muslim states. But I don't see why, for all the fact there are over 25 Muslim states, Jews can't have a state of their own. And this seems to be saying, kill the Jews.
But I think...
Now, I was, just let me make one more point. I was at a meeting, we're going back 20 years, run by the Foreign Office in England, which brought together representatives of Jews and Palestinians, and there were Palestinians there from Hamas at the time. And whereas the PLO were prepared to think in terms of some sort of, shall we say, interaction with the Jewish state, the position of Hamas is, we will never, ever make peace. We will agree to a hudna, and a hudna basically means a ceasefire, but we will never rest until we have removed the Jewish state. And there are people in the Islamic world who think that. There are plenty of people who don't think that. But the one-sidedness of the demonstrations is what I find very, very depressing. But that's politics. And this is a political campaign. And in politics, you've got to win, and you don't care about the other side. And that's what's sick.
So thank you, Jeremy. Firstly, why do you think the what I mean, there's so many things to talk about here. I mean, firstly, what can we do to heal the divide between the Jewish people and the Palestinian people? Or do you think the way, okay, let's actually want to rephrase that. Do you think the way Israel is handling the conflict right now is the best solution they have under the circumstances? Like the best way to, like the way that, do you believe what we're seeing? Because it's pretty terrifying. The information that's coming out of Palestine is devastating, and you can understand why it's creating such a reaction, right? It's so, you're seeing children dying. You see there's more, 20,000 plus people killed. This terrible destruction of people's homelands, this like starvation, all of these tactics. Is this true? Like, and how should Israel handle that situation in your eyes? I mean, no, it's a really difficult question, but what are your thoughts? And
I would love there to be peace negotiations. But for now, for 78 years, they've got nowhere. We have not achieved that. And unfortunately, during that time, there has been a concerted effort through education of hatred of Jews, of killing Jews, paying to kill Jews, which is still play to slay, part of what happens on the West Bank. And Israel needs to protect its citizens. I am amazed that nobody is prepared to accept that raping an Israeli woman is a crime, that torturing children, burning them alive, is a crime, that the only crime here is being carried out by Israel. I don't see how Israel otherwise can defend itself from the fact that year after year, rockets in their thousands have been fired at their civilian population. And that year after year, shall we say, I have a school friend of mine who lost his wife and 2 daughters that were killed on the road to Jericho. They haven't done anything harm to anybody. And yet we're in a situation where there is violence. When there is violence, how else are you going to survive other than capitulating? Now, the fact is that we're living in a world in which we are being beaten up on both sides. We're beating up on the left-wing Marxist side, and the Marxist side has always been opposed to anything religious, although ironically, they are now allying with jihadi Muslims who don't believe in any of the values that the left wing believe in. On the other hand, we have the religious antagonism towards Judaism. And so you've got this tsunami of all the different elements on the right, on the left, in the middle, are all focusing entirely on Israel and not on how we got here. And how we got here was the refusal of the Palestinians to accept a partition, to accept the terms that were originally offered to them, and decided to go to war.
So those that are pro-Palestine and anti-Israel said that the common, just to speak to that, the common narrative that exists a lot in social media is that Israel stole the homeland of the Palestinian people, and they had no right to be there in the first place. And so when people trace back the information, they're saying, well, Israel stole this homeland, they enslaved the Palestinian people, they ghettoized them, and naturally the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves from the way they have been subjected to. And also the majority of children and women in Palestine, they are victims too, like people in Israel. Like, how do you respond? So that's a lot of...
It was their choice. First of all, let's not listen to the myth that Israel has no right to be in the land. We were in the land there long before the Muslims conquered it. So if anybody is the colonialists, it's the Muslims for kicking the Jews out.
I mean,
we were living there for longer than they have.
It's in the Bible. I mean,
yeah, it is exactly so.
Goes back a long time.
There's enough archaeological evidence to prove the existence of Jews following the Torah, living in the land of Israel for thousands of years, and constantly going back through the Middle period, from the Middle Ages, throughout the 16th, 17th, and 18th period, century, Jews were going back to settle in Israel, not in numbers, because the economics didn't facilitate it. The only time it facilitated it was in the 16th century, when Tzfat was an industrial center that could retain and provide for larger numbers of Jews in the land of Israel, which was part of the Ottoman Empire. So the mistake is to assume that Israel has no right, or they had no right. And right from the very beginning, they tried their best to come to some agreement with the Muslims and with the Arabs. And they wouldn't. I mean, the first massacres took place in Hebron in 1929, when they attacked yeshiva students and other people in Hebron and massacred large numbers of them and raped large numbers of them. So the violence has been there on both sides, if you want to say. So if you're speaking in violence, there is violence that way too. And secondly, why don't you ask the question of why is it the rest of the Muslim Arab world allowed Palestinians to remain in concentration camps, if you want, in their own territory, never giving them the rights, never allowing them to find any alternative. Plenty of refugees have had to pick up and move to other places. Virtually all the people living in Israel have become refugees at some stage. Millions were driven out of Arab territory after the 1948 and found somewhere to settle. When Jews were in trouble with Germany, the rest of the world didn't come to their help. Not one country was prepared to take them in. And therefore, the need to have a homeland, which we have certain links with going back a long time, is part of history. But everybody has tailored history to suit their own ends. Give you another example. When Israel withdrew from Gaza, they took Jewish settlers out of Gaza and said to the Gazans, run your show. In Gaza, they had set up factories, they had set up industries, agricultural centers, and they were making significant money and doing very well. As soon as they left, instead of taking them over, the Gazans destroyed them all completely. So they are making a living out of victimhood. They are imprisoning their own people. They are using human beings as human shields. Hamas is living in amongst them and has towers underground from which rockets are elevated up to fire. How else is one going to stop it? Asking them nicely? It hasn't worked.
But the amount of I mean, it's such a difficult because anyone listening to this conversation who feels that the Jewish people are the perpetrators can they see a different perspective, do you think?
No, because they've been conditioned. For years now, the Arab world has been funding departments in universities that have only given the Arab point of view, and have only given the impression that Israel is entirely to blame and there's no blame on the other side. And they only appoint like-minded people to teach in these departments and refuse to teach another point of view. So if this happens, inevitably, people are going to think there's only one point of view.
What about a Zionist state? What about the Zionist agenda? Is there not on the other side as well a very anti-Muslim kind of movement amongst like that? It can't be a one-sided thing. There has to be.
There might be some, but remember, there are many Orthodox Jews who don't believe in Zionism. There are many Orthodox Jews who want to live in peace in the Holy Land and not be murdered. And so many Israelis don't like Zionism. I don't see myself as a Zionist. I see myself as a Jew. And so, the fact that there are people who have politicized the issue The fact that you have in Israel a division between the right wing and the left wing shows that, like any healthy country, we have different opinions. Where do you get different opinions in the Arab world? Get different opinions in Iran? They'll rape you and they'll kill you. And this is the fear. The fear is that if Israel doesn't lower itself, then its defense, Hamas will come in, and the Hamas attitude is, we can do whatever we like to kill you, and we'll kill you because you don't belong here. And I think we're in a position in the world now where the West has a very serious problem about which culture you want to preserve. Do you want to preserve a religious culture? And I don't. Or do you want a liberal, open-minded, tolerant culture, which I do? And unfortunately, the hatred that I see coming from big sections of the Islamic world tells me that these are people in whichever country in Europe or in the United States they're living, they want it to be their land. They want it to be their culture and not another one. And it's amazing, this alliance between the left throughout Europe and in America with extreme Islam, because the Marxist position is it doesn't matter who you ally with so long as you get your end. That's what Marxism is. That was the approach of Stalin with Hitler, Hitler with Stalin. The end justifies the means. And so we are faced with a serious challenge in the West. They've given up on Christianity, fine. That's your right to give up on religion. Nobody's forcing religion on you. When Jews go somewhere, they don't try to convert the country to being Jewish. So there's a problem, a bigger problem, much bigger problem than this. This is symptomatic of it. It's the boil that's boiling over. It's the immediate problem. And it's creating something that any human being cares about. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't defend ourselves. And defend ourselves means stopping the people who are sending rockets.
But hold on a sec. But stopping. I'm just playing. By the way, I'm just kind of. Because a lot of people that I care about, or I'm just speaking the thoughts that they might have. And what they share and what they will expose is like the way that like the tactics that Israel is using for this war are so aggressive.
No, they're not. Consider how many people were bombed by the Americans, by the British in World War II. Bombing cities without regard. Here we are dealing with a place of 2 million people, 3 million people, of whom maybe 20, maybe 30,000 were caught up in collateral damage, but not intentionally, and warnings were given in advance. So let's be practical about this and realistic about it. War is disgusting. Who started this war?
This is the question, right? Because once you
start... right, but then who started what happened on October the 7th?
Well, this is obvious, like, on October the 7th, it was but even this, okay, so what I get confused with is how the fuck did Israel not see this coming?
Oh, that's another matter. Israel has its failures. It failed disastrously.
But do you think it's a failure, or do you think that somehow they wanted, was there a deeper, because another conspiracy is that they allowed this attack to happen so they had an excuse. I'm just saying, like, this information is like out there.
It's like all these 9/11 conspiracy theories.
So it's like concept, because they have such an amazing shield. What's it? The ability to see what's happening on everyone. How did they allow 1,000 terrorists to storm into their country and to essentially operate without impunity for 6-7 hours? When they've got the best defense system in the world? How is that possible?
Well, I can give you several reasons why it was.
Someone would say that.
First of all, they were fighting a war on the West Bank in Jenin. Their army was split into different areas. Secondly, They failed. There were failures before in the Yom Kippur War. They get overconfident. They're human like anybody else. And this was a disaster. And of course, people will blame Netanyahu for not being, for being the guy in charge at the time, and overconfident that by making good relations with other Arab countries, with the Gulf states, that this was some sort of protection. He placed too much trust in that. And people took the eye off the ball, and there was a failure. Everybody agrees in Israel. This was a disastrous failure, and people have been fired and more will be fired, and that the army got overconfident. It relied on its technology, and its technology let it down. Some of it did. So this is what happens. You want to say they did it intentionally. That just shows how sick these people are. They actually wanted to sacrifice their own babies and their own women to being raped and tortured. You've got to be sick to believe that.
And with regards to the current governmental body in Israel and the way they are managing the situation, can you speak to that? Do you want to speak to that? Or
yes, I mean, Israel is caught. Internally, it's always been divided between secular and religious. The religious are divided between Zionists and anti-Zionists. The secular are divided between Russian secularists who are right-wing and left-wing secularists who are neo-Marxists. It's always been divided. There's always been conflict. I had a very close friend of mine was the son of the first chief rabbi of Israel, Herzog, who was also the ambassador to Canada. And way back in 1958, he said to me, if it were not for the external threat, the Jews in Israel would have a civil war and tear each other apart. So we've always been divided, and there are always different opinions. And I don't have the inside information to know what the right position is. I don't like the right wing. I'm opposed to the right wing extremists. I would like to see them removed from government. I abhor the fact that they are in government. I want to see change, but I also want to see Israel defend itself. And just as America has a problem now between Trump and Biden, we got our problems. Israel, England has its problems. Every country has political problems of a right and a left and disagreement about who and what policy you should pursue. But in the end, Israel is faced with an existential threat. And certainly, sort of whatever you may say about the treatment of Gaza, if you would be there and actually see the amount of luxury and the amount of wealth that was poured into it, and this myth of it being in a kind of a prison, there's another side to that too.
what happens?
All the leaders of Hamas and the PLO have massive mansions. They get money thrown in vast amounts from elsewhere, and most of it ends up in Swiss bank accounts. And they are responsible. Look how corrupt the PLO is. People in Palestine don't like the PLO. They've reneged on the elections. They are corrupt. So what? Israel's going to give a government to people who are going to come in and change and fire rockets from central Israel? Allow Persia to come in, as it has done already in Jenin, which is why they're fighting in Jenin. I mean, what are you going to do other than just give up and walk away? And where do you think people are going to be accepted, eh? Assuming all the millions of Jews have to go somewhere else, where are they going to go? Who's going to take them? Forget about it.
What do you think is there a solution in your mind?
Yeah, ideally, the solution would be a two-state solution. But I can't see either Hamas or the PLO agreeing to it. It's been on the table. It was put on the table by 6 different prime ministers of Israel. Make concessions. And Israel did time and time again. It wasn't enough. All right, well, fair enough. You don't want to compromise. It's your right. But any solution must be one which guarantees Israel's safety. And a solution which simply says, okay, Hamas, you're now in charge. We trust you. You think you trust them? Would you trust them with your children?
You're fucking crazy. No, I mean, like, no, because I mean, it's quite clear that they want the death and destruction of every Jewish person alive.
So what are we supposed to do, tell me?
I don't know.
Defend ourselves, unfortunately. And I think Israel's doing a brilliant job in minimizing the amount of destruction and the amount of casualties. And we don't know how many of these casualties actually were fighters and were armed. And we can't trust the pictures that come out because we know they're faked all the time. And so plenty of examples of rows of bodies have been photographed as corpses. And then when the camera's away, the corpses get up and walk away.
I mean, I don't want to kind of play. I'm not there, so I don't know what is happening.
No, but you'll take an anti-Israel point of view on the news.
But I actually see a lot of, I get a lot of information about all the terrible things that Israel's doing right now.
Yeah.
But why do people connect that with Jewish people? Why do you think it's like?
Well, then let me ask you this. Then why are all these demonstrators saying kill the Jews? They should be saying kill the Israelis.
Why are they saying kill the Jews?
They are. Posters, packages, I've seen them all over the place.
Why?
Why? Because the narrative is this is the bloody Jews. Muslims, these are the Jews. These are the Christ killers for Christianity.
Okay, I want to swap. What does it mean to you to be a Jew?
To be a Jew, it means to follow my culture, to follow my tradition, my spiritual tradition. In addition to that, that's on the religious level. In addition to that, it's a homeland in a world which doesn't like us.
Hold on, like that's not the question. My question is, what does it mean from a soul level?
A soul level, to connect me with God. And the way I connect with God is through my tradition. In the same way a Muslim connects with God through the Muslim tradition, or Christian through the Christian tradition. I have my tradition. I would give up land for peace. I wouldn't mind, if the whole place, the whole of the area would go back to a new Ottoman Empire, if I thought I could live safely there.
Are Jewish people innately violent?
No more than anybody else is. Any generalization about people, good, bad, is puerile, naive, and sick. I mean, are all Mexicans evil because they're Mexican drug barons? Are all Americans evil because they bombed Iraq? Are all Chinese evil because of what they're doing to the Uyghurs? It's ridiculous. But most Jews around the world are peace-loving people.
But historically, have Jewish people been violent?
There might have been occasions when we've defended ourselves in the past. Are you talking about invading from the land of Canaan 3,000 years ago? Or are you talking in the last 2,000 years ago?
I'm saying last 2,000 years, I would say.
No, well, come on. Come on, what violence have we done? How many people have we killed compared to Britain and the Empire, compared to America?
Jeremy, that's my point, actually. Like, it's arguably that you get very upset with me. I'm just using Jewish people are arguably some of the most peaceful people amongst all nations, or at least violent religious group amongst all religious groups. Christian, Muslim.
No, I wouldn't say, I would say definitely not violent, but we do believe in self-defense. We're not pacifists. We believe in self-defense. And that's the only condition under which you can go to war, self-defense.
But Jews don't necessarily, Are Jews colonists? Do you think?
How can you generalize? Honestly, can you generalize about the Brits? Can you generalize about Christians? Can you generalize about Muslims? Can you say all Muslims are jihadi murderers? I mean, Islam was founded on invasion. It believes in, you can conquer to perpetuate Islam. You're allowed to rape ISIS. ISIS is allowed to rape Christians because you conquer them and you convert them to Islam. This is what ISIS did. So are all Muslims violent? There's more violence coming from Muslims. I mean, look what violence took place in Syria. Look how many people, hundreds of thousands were killed in Syria. Nobody's making a noise about that because they're killed by other Muslims. Ask yourself that. 20,000 in Gaza compared to hundreds of thousands in Syria. And we won't talk about what ISIS did. Or we won't talk about that poor little girl in Iran who made a little TikTok video about opposing the government, who was raped and killed. So if anybody's violent, it seems to me you could argue the Muslim world is violent. Yes, they say, but our religion is about peace. So is ours. We also talk about shalom and pray for shalom and pray for peace every day.
But to heal the bridge between Muslim people, is there a way of bridging or?
Look, my brother is working, my sister-in-law are working very hard, and they have very good relations in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf states. And they are much less anti-Israel than American kids in college.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't it crazy?
Why is that? Because
politics. It's all to do with politics. That's behind everything.
We need to
Yugoslavia or anything like that.
We need to have another conversation about the politics of what's really going on. That's a separate. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate your candidness, your openness, and your willingness to hear all points of view, however outlandish they might seem to you.
And I continue to pray for peace every day. Thank you.